Your Excellency, Sheikh Nahyan Mubarak Al Nahyan, Minister of Tolerance and Coexistence, Your Eminences, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all and welcome to the Women's Pavilion by Expo 2020 in collaboration with Cartier. My name is Hind El Awais. I'm the Senior Vice President of the International Participants Department and the Women's Pavilion. And it is my great pleasure and honor to be your host, presenter, moderator for today's session, the Women's World Majlis, entitled Tolerance and Inclusivity for Women's Rights and Empowerment. We have traveled from far corners of the world to be here today, in the heart of Expo 2020 Dubai. We shall explore, learn, and understand the true values of tolerance and coexistence and inclusivity, and see them for what they are as drivers for gender equality and women's empowerment. And we hope through our discussion today to truly understand what that means for women, what challenges they face, and what that specifically looks like, especially in fragile contexts. We will hopefully emerge with ideas and solutions to carry us forward as we continue to do our work in our respective areas. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Sheikh Nahyan Mubarak Al Nahyan, our Minister for Tolerance and Coexistence, to the podium for his keynote address.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, conference participants, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Women's Pavilion at the Expo 2020 Dubai. It is a great pleasure to be with you today to inaugurate this conference on women's rights and empowerment. I extend my warmest greetings to all of you. You have assembled in a country that is the world leader in the recognition of women's rights and gender equality. I'm sure you've been told that about 60% of the workforce in the federal government are women, the education 95% are women, and we are proud of their achievement. So it is something to be proud of here in the UAE. It is my distinct honor and privilege to begin today by expressing thanks, gratitude to the champion of women's rights and empowerment in the United Arab Emirates, the mother of the nation, Her Highness Sheikha Fatima bint Mubarak. Her Highness is the major force for development and progress in our country. Her vision and her commitment to a comprehensive and sustained development have enabled all of us to appreciate the role of women in our society. Sheikha Fatima believes deeply in education for all our citizens, men and women alike. She continues to work tirelessly for empowerment of women. She recognizes that women possess priceless talents, skills, experiences, and viewpoints vital to a flourishing society, a vibrant economy, and a well-governed nation. Since the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan formed our nation 50 years ago, UAE leaders have encouraged and supported the full and equal participation of women in our society. His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and the Deputy Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, is intent on shaping a country that empowers women. He has always consider women's advancement vital to the future of the United Arab Emirates and has worked methodically to expand the role of women in the leadership of our nation. In the UAE, we have succeeded in changing mindset about the role of women in society. We have removed social and economic barriers that might slow the advancement of women and have urged all women to set their sights high, well beyond any perceived glass ceiling. Emirati women have joined in these efforts with a vigorous ambition to have the same standing as men in society. But this year, as you know, we are celebrating our Golden Jubilee. As we look ahead to the next 50 years, our national goals continue to place great importance on enhancing women's roles, nurturing their rights, and supporting their position in society. Of course, Emirati women are not the only women in the world who are reaching for the sky. Around the globe, we see more women in position of leadership in practically every field of endeavor. More discriminatory practices have ended. More women than ever have equal access to education. More women are healthy and safe. Indeed, women have seen improvement in their circumstances, sometimes quite a dramatic improvement in many parts of the world. If this was the case universally, we would not be meeting here today. Unfortunately, in some parts of the world, there has been little or insufficient change. There continues to be places where women still endure unequal treatment. This inequality takes many forms, ranging from social, economic, legal, health, and representation, to the risk of personal safety and life itself. Even in the most highly developed countries, it is not uncommon to find women paid substantially less than men for comparable work, disproportionately represented among those living in poverty and discriminated against in virtually every aspect of the employment relationship. And all too often, women do not receive deserved recognition for their talents or their accomplishments. Dear friends, what women in the world deserve and what they should have a right to expect is the opportunity to develop and exercise their full potential for leadership in whatever roles they aspire to. Women in the world should have the opportunity for high-quality education, rewarding careers, satisfying family lives, and to be of service to both private and public life. We, men and women, still have a great deal of work ahead of us if we are to construct a world that values women as it values men, a world that lets merit run free without a gender handicap, a world that welcomes, protects, educates, and empowers all our daughters. An example of this work is the Declaration of the Women's Empowerment Principles formulated by the UN, By endorsing these principles and vowing to observe them, we are taking revolutionary action, a peaceful and well-considered action that itself justifies our commitment to the values of equality, human fraternity, and mutual respect. But as we adopt the women's empowerment principles and establish implementation plans for overcoming discrimination and achieving gender equality in the workplace, we must also consider women's biological role as the bearer of children and their families' role as the mothers of children. We know how absolutely essential those roles are to the successful future of civilization. We also know the importance of women's role in business, government, science, arts, finance, and banking, transportation, healthcare, and education. I know that women possess the knowledge, experience, and imagination necessary to reconcile these roles. It would be quite wonderful if today's discussions could chart a path toward reconciliation of women's roles as givers of life, mothers of children, and leaders in all aspects of the world's social and economic endeavors. I fully endorse the purposes of the conference, especially its intent to build bridges connecting men and women throughout the world around issues of women's rights and empowerment. In the spirit of Expo 2020 Dubai, your conference is dedicated to the knowledge that working for women's rights and equality is essential to reducing tension and mistrust among us and between us. The work is essential for bringing development, peace, prosperity, and hope to every corner of the earth. All communities face challenges regarding health, the environment, economic development, education, shelter, safety, and equal opportunity. As local citizens, women can move their communities to engage these important issues in an innovative way. As global citizens, women can communicate and cooperate across geographical and cultural boundaries and reinforce local efforts in ways that have historically eluded men. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close with a word of hope. My hope is that your work of women and men of goodwill around the world will lead to the renaming of future conferences when that time comes, when women and men share equal opportunity, identical rights, equivalent compensation for comparable work, and the same guarantees of safety, education, and healthcare. I see worldwide conferences entitled simply Human Beings Development and Empowerment. The future well-being of our planet depends on the contributions of all human beings. Thank you for your efforts to move women and men toward that glorious end. Once again, I welcome all of you to this conference. I hope it will be a productive opportunity for building knowledge, inspiration, understanding, and friendship. Thank you very much, and God bless you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency Sheikh Nahyan, for sharing with us such an insightful and enriching narrative on women's empowerment and gender equality in its totality, really. And we also hope that we reach the day where this discussion is not an agenda item that we still have to debate, where equal rights for men and women have been achieved, and we can really work together towards our future. Tolerance and Inclusivity Week at Expo is one of the most important weeks we are tackling. It is a central theme, and it is a reflection of our commitment as a country to values that your ministry, that your work has been espousing. I believe we are one of the only countries in the world that has a ministry for tolerance and coexistence. And with that, I think we are grateful to have the opportunity to work with you, to look at these values and to explore them from a gender perspective, and to look at how women contribute and how they benefit from values of tolerance and coexistence. Thank you so much, Your Highness. We're going to get ready for our first panel, and we have a very special treat for our discussion today. We have two amazing panels, and we have a short film by Nadine Labaki, which we're going to share with you all. But before that, we have a little movie to show you, a little 60-second film to show you about our Women's Pavilion, and then I'll be calling the first panelists, the first set of speakers on stage. Thank you. Now you've taken a little peek into our pavilion, but it doesn't mean that you're exempted from visiting. You still have to visit. Before I invite our panelists to the stage, I just want to say why we're doing this, the importance of this discussion. We are witnessing global cycles of events that continue to pull and tear and grapple humanity at large between despair and misfortune on one hand, and hope and opportunity on the other. These extreme tractions affect and impact humankind differently, especially women. And what we want to focus on today are the positive values that we can espouse together as a global community to create more hope and more opportunity. So our first panel, the importance of tolerance and coexistence and inclusivity in fragile contexts, how to create and recreate a stable social fabric, will feature the Honorable Baroness Floella Karen Eunice Benjamin. May I invite you to the stage? A member of the House of Lords of the UK and a long-time influencer before Instagram. You had a long-running TV program. You really entered the homes, the minds, the hearts of people, and you have a very interesting story to tell. Mr. Peter Maurer, may I invite you to the stage? President of the International Committee of the Red Cross from Switzerland, a long-time diplomat, championing peacekeeping and humanitarian work. I'm so glad you're here.
Change, but I didn't want to start with an argument.
And finally, Binta Diop, founder and president of Femmes Africa Solidarité. and the special envoy of the chairperson of the African Union,
Thank you.
of the African Union for Women, Peace and Security,
Thank you very
and
much.
a true leader for women
No,
across
I
the
manage.
African continent. And a true gentleman.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're really excited to have you all here. I personally have been following a lot of your work for many years. I can't wait to engage with you in this discussion. And I'm actually going to start with Madame Diop, who has been leading on this agenda of women, peace, and security, a very important agenda, putting women at the heart of peace negotiations, conflict prevention, protection of women in difficult situations. And you are doing that for the whole continent of Africa, a very big job and a tough one. And my question to you, perhaps to kick us off, is about the women who have created peace. We know from examples when we look at Liberia, we know that when women are able to mobilize, when women are able to get together, they have a huge impact. Would you perhaps talk to us about your experience in that, and what specifically you feel is a key ingredient for women to recognize their own power, to mobilize, and to sort of coalesce around an issue of peace?
Thank you so much. Before I respond to your question, let me just recognize Excellency. I'm very happy to hear Excellency Sheikh Nayan for your inspiring speech. But let me also say we recognizing the Women Pavilion, which is in the heart of the Expo 2020. Recognizing that gender equality is in the heart of the development of the United Arab Emirates. So congratulations. Your question. I spent 40 years of my life in conflict zone in Africa, from Liberia to Somalia to South Sudan to recently Ethiopia. And I think that the most important is when war erupts and when we are not able to prevent it. At the end of the day, is those who bear the brunt, and which are the women. Mm-hmm. And I call them the heroines in our continent, because those are the ones who can build the bridge when we are talking about today tolerance and coexistence. What I've seen in Liberia, Sierra Leone, or Guinea, the Manu River women, who belong to different backgrounds, different political party, different ethnic group. But when their country torn apart or when they engage in war, the women came together and discuss and have a common agenda. Because at the end of the day, the impact of the conflict, the impact of the war is more on them than any others. So they come together, and I had the privilege to facilitate discussion among the women, mediate, and make sure that they come at the table. They are not most of the time invited. They are not invited at the table. That's the reality. We invite those who have the guns, those who want to share the power, But what we do is to make sure that women knock the door, sit down, and bring their own agenda. And that's what we have been doing in many countries. And what we are trying to do, even right now we are speaking when it comes, for example, to Ethiopia or other countries. So I think women, be the peace broker, can bring the big difference in negotiation, but also in reconciliation. So that's the part that I have been playing as an African Union special envoy. For me, it's not just to be sitting in Addis Ababa, but going in the war zone. I met Peter many times, but making sure that women sit at the right table and they contribute to that. And they have an agenda. And it's not just the agenda only on humanitarian, it's necessary because on violence against women, to fight against impunity. But at the end of the day, they are also part of the hard talk, which is the power sharing, but resource sharing. It's about building their infrastructure, the schools, the education of their children, so on and so forth. So women at the table are necessary. It's an imperative to build the peace in Africa, but in the world. And leadership of the women matter. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. We actually have a whole storyline in the pavilion, a seat at the table. And we talk about it in politics and business, and I agree with you. And I'd love to, if we have more time, we're going to come back to this question of how to mobilize women. And I think that applies in many different contexts as well. Peter, very happy to have you here. I want to pick up where Binta left off. And she talked about women's roles. The ICRC launched a report a few years ago with the National Geographic to unstereotype what we think about women, right? Especially in fragile contexts. They're not just victims. They are movers and shakers. They are fighters. They're humanitarians, mothers, daughters, community leaders. Can you, from your view, tell us why is it so necessary for us to understand the complex roles that women play?
Thanks a lot for the question, and from my side, of course, as well. It's wonderful to be here, Sheikh Nayan, Nayan, and to pick up. I would like, maybe on my side, to really continue where Binta has just left us. I do believe what is of critical importance to a humanitarian organization working at the front lines of conflict is to recognize that you can't do good humanitarian work with half of the population outside of humanitarian work. Once you recognize that you have to design humanitarianism inclusive, you trap into the danger, as you mentioned in your question, to go stereotype and to look at women only as victims. And of course, women are victims and have specific vulnerabilities in conflict, and we are the first ones to recognize. Sexual violence is predominantly affecting women in conflict and needs to be addressed specifically. So don't let's paper over the fact that there are vulnerabilities and specific vulnerabilities which needs to be addressed. But then there is another truth, and you alluded to with regard to what we did with the National Geographic, is if you want to do good humanitarianism, then you want to address your response also to the specific need of specific roles in society, and not only to one stereotypal role. And you have mentioned them. And what strikes me is that we want to highlight in our work the specific role that women may take. Women may be part of the armed forces. Today, women may be breadwinners in family. Women may be civilians in conflict. Women may be professionals. And leaders in societies. And I think what I have learned in almost 10 years as a head of ICRC is that we have to recognize first those roles to be able to design humanitarianism and humanitarian responses in crisis situations in a way that they are inclusive and addressing those specificities. And there are a couple of good examples how to do it, if I may just take another minute on that. We have seen that if we do recognize those specific roles and we integrate them into the programming, then we get better results. We have seen that professional networks of women are powerful movers and shakers in the midst of fragile contexts and difficult situations of violence with which we are confronted. We have seen that microeconomic initiatives, and here I think we both see the same thing on the ground, that microeconomic initiatives carried by women and women's groups are some of the most powerful instruments and segues to move societies out of dependency of aid. We have seen some of those networks playing a powerful role. And of course, women at the table has been mentioned. It's of critical importance to frontline humanitarian work. That's the reason why, for instance, in our frontline humanitarian negotiation training that we do, we have specific training for women negotiators at frontlines, because it's not the natural place where we find the predominance of women active. So we need to compensate and to bring the wisdom of women frontline negotiators in, and we can only do it when we design programs which capacitate, train, and highlight skills which may be there but may be dormant and may have to be integrated in our work. So these are just a couple of reflections why this is so important in fragile context, to get out of the stereotypes and basically to build a society and an inclusive society when it is most difficult to build it. You can't expect societies to be inclusive if during conflict you, through the way you work and through the way you engage in conflict, you enhance the divisions and you deepen the divisions in societies. So it has to start when it is most difficult, when societies are divided, when the most obvious is not obvious. And this is maybe the message I wanted to bring to this pavilion and discussion.
Thank you. That's a very important message. Thank you. And hopefully we're going to have a little bit of time to come back to some of these thoughts and ideas. But I do want to go to you, Baroness, and talk about your experience in tackling stereotypes. You may not have been necessarily on the front lines of conflict, but you did move to the UK as an immigrant, per se. You did experience what it means to be the other, and you overcame that, and you spread a story of inclusivity beautifully. And I want to know from your perspective, perhaps, what it means to build on values of tolerance, especially in a context that was not originally yours.
Well, thank you very much for that question. And as everybody else has said this morning, thank you, Your Excellency, for your passionate speech. You are comfortable in your female skin. I can tell that. I could tell that. Thank you. I'm also thrilled to be here in this Women's Pavilion because it just shows the importance of women to have an area dedicated to women, for people to come in and see, both men and women, to know how we can change the world and make a difference. So thank you for that as well. I feel proud to be a woman. I feel proud to be able to change people's hearts and minds. And I do that by understanding what it's like to be a child, to see the world through the eyes of the child. And I had two of the most wonderful parents who brought me up in Trinidad. I was born in 1949. I'm 72 years old.
Wow. That's amazing.
And I feel that I have got to this stage in my life by having a father who was a philosopher, an adventurer, who opened his children's minds to the world. showed us what was out there and what we could capture. But I had a mother who was an earth mother, a mother who poured love into her 6 children and clamped me with love every day of my life. She rubbed me down with oils and told me that I was beautiful. And she poured cod liver oil into me. See, that's why I look so good at 72.
Thank you. Good tip.
But she told me, and she told my 5 brothers and sisters every single day, that education was your passport to life. You go to school and you learn. Because once you have an education, no one can take it away from you. And she always told us to feel worthy, to feel no one in the world was better than you. Whether you were a king, an excellency, a pauper, you were as good as anyone else, and to have respect. And if you felt like that, you could go out there and show the world that confidence that you need, like a swan, gliding along. No matter what's thrown at you, the grenades that comes at you, the hatred that comes at you, you just go through it with that air of confidence. And it comes at you because when you're a woman of color, every single day it happens. Perhaps not here in Dubai, but where I live now in England, you're always recognized as a black woman. Not a woman who's a solicitor, not a woman who's a teacher, not a woman who's a politician. You are a black person. And that's a trauma that many people of color carry with them. You carry a certain trauma with you that you have to overcome. But you overcome it, and I've overcome it with love. And when I was brought up in Trinidad for the first 10 years of my life, and I was told I was special in school. We stood up and we sang, "Land of hope and glory, rule Britannia, God save the Queen." I was told I was part of the motherland, and I was important. They didn't tell me anything about my African heritage. They didn't tell me that my African heritage were dragged from their villages, men, women, children, shackled together. If they weren't strong, they were dead, they were gone. They didn't tell me that they were put in a pit on the west coast of Africa, waiting for the big ship to come in to take them across to the Caribbean. If they weren't strong, they were dead, they were gone. I went to those forts, and I saw those forts. And I cried for 3 days thinking of what my ancestors had to go through. They went through the door of no return, packed on a ship like sardines to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. If they weren't strong, they were dead, they were gone. They didn't tell me when they got to the Caribbean they were branded on the chest, enslaved people. Never to speak with their own tongue, practice their own religion, their own culture. Men, women, children branded on the chest and scattered across the Caribbean. Mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, never to see each other again. They didn't tell me that if my ancestors protested, they were hung, drawn, and quartered, that I should be proud to be a Caribbean survivor. They didn't tell me any of that, but it didn't matter at the time, because when I came to England, I felt proud to be part of the motherland, but I was spat upon. I was told, go back to where you come from. We don't need you here. We don't want you here. And for the first 4 years of my life in England, I fought every day. Because my mother had to tell me something that no mother should have to tell their children. She said, "Well, you're living in England now, and some people are not going to like you. Some people are going to hate you because of the color of your skin. But I want all you to be strong. Go to school and learn. Education is your passport to life. And remember, mommy and daddy loves you. Loves you. Love is all you need as a child." And that's what got me through.
Wow.
After fighting for 4 years, I had what I call a spiritual moment when I realized that it was other people's problems. If they saw me as a black person, a person of color, it was their problem, not mine. All I had to do was feel worthy, to feel as if I can do it. And that's the message I pass on to children. Will childhood last a lifetime?
Thank you. That is really amazing. Thank you, Your Highness.
Thank you for everything.
It's okay. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Wow. What a contribution to share with us today these ideas and these values and this experience. And I just want to go back quickly to Binta and Peter and ask you to reflect on what Baroness Floella just shared. If we were to take these ideas and implement them in your own spaces, what would that mean? What would that look like? Because we know we operate on a sort of, on a human, on a people level, and then there's the legal, there's the normative spaces, and the two don't speak to each other many times. So, Peter, perhaps.
Well, look, what is obvious is that stigmatization is one of the biggest driver of violence and conflict, if not the single most important driver of violence and conflict. And that's the reason why in the founding documents of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, in particular the Geneva Conventions, our work is defined without prejudice to race, religion, and so on, and gender, and so on, and so on. So I think the challenge is a daily challenge to see how we change behavior which is more compatible to the framework to which we are committed and which is basically what we all know shouldn't happen, but happens all the time. So I think that's where our big challenge is. As an organization, you have to put in place the rules and mechanisms. You have to ensure that people do respect non-stigmatization within the organization as a critical principle of work. If you engage with community, you have to be careful.
Yeah.
And you have to create those mechanisms identifying stigmatization. You have lived stigmatization as a person, and you have seen it almost physically coming to you. What I find today is one of the big challenges is the more informal and unspoken prejudices, which boil down to the same that you have experienced as a black woman, but are much more subtle and much more difficult, first to recognize, and secondly to discard from your work, from your program, from your organization, from your interaction with communities.
Yeah, thank you. Binta?
What I like in our discussion is not to go back to what affects the life of the women, but moving forward, push back the pushback. And I think that is very important to look into what kind of solutions, as Peter have been saying. And in our continent, in Africa, the women are mobilizing. You talk about how do we mobilize. I think it's important to have a movement, a platform whereby women can have their own, our situation room where we can sit, safe place, when we can talk, have our agenda, and move in our advocacy. So creating an ecosystem in the continent. What is important in the ecosystem is the policy. For example, we fought to have a protocol on women's human rights in Africa. It's very progressive because even when a woman is raped, the issue of abortion is right there in that, which is very controversial in the world. But we have the right policy. What we want, and the mechanism. For example, we have a movement that is created called the African Women Leaders Network with Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, all the female president of Africa. We know that Rwanda has the majority of women in their parliament. That's the reality. There are many countries where we have now ministers of finance are women, ministers of foreign affairs are women. So the leadership of women is evolving, maybe because of the situation that Africa have experienced so far. Women are creating their own bank. Women are making sure that they are in the agriculture sector, they are in the SMEs, etc., etc. Yet, we wanted the political will more and action in implementation. And that's why we are looking at accountability. Because at the end of the day, you can put that ecosystem, but if those who are, the leadership on top and still dominated by male, but what we want is to make sure that we follow, we push, and we have what we say, the positive masculinity, which I think, the he for she that you and women have called, like Peter, who always advocate for women's rights. So we need to have a society where women and men, but right now dominated by the men, but what we're trying to do is to make sure that we have the dialogue and the conversation to change the mindset of those men, and that ecosystem is helping us to move forward. But still, as I said, conflict is there. We need to respond to the humanitarian issue, violence against women in terms of, especially during COVID. It's not just in Africa, but everywhere we are seeing violence at home, in the community, everywhere. So what we call, this violence, which is another, when you look at COVID, which is another disease, which is another threat to the economy and to the development. So violence against women is there everywhere in the world, and we need to make sure that we use the men and the women to prevent this kind of violence that is occurring in our society. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I may have
yeah,
in there,
no, of course.
adding to that, pornography is something that we need to address. It's the elephant in the room that many people don't realize. The images that you see in porn, online pornography, films, television programs depicting women is something that needs to be dealt with. And what you're finding is more and more children are watching it. Because of COVID, we gave our children tablets to do their online learning. We don't realize that that is a weapon of destruction. When children are watching images, young boys are watching, 10-year-olds and younger are watching images of how women are depicted. You don't feel any respect for women because you think women like it, because it's women that actually are in those images that they're seeing as well, laughing, looking as if they're enjoying it. So we have to start with childhood. Childhood lasts a lifetime, and if we don't educate our children in a way that they understand the importance of being a woman and the importance you play as a man in both coexistence, then you will fail, because it's no point waiting until people get older. You've got to start young, and you've got to make sure that boys understand the makeup of a woman. Understand the makeup. When women have their monthlies, their time of the month, how women behave in a certain way, why they're behaving in that certain way. Through education in schools, that's what needs to be taught. As a mother, as a father, that's how you bring up your children. So women also understand what men go through in their monthly cycles. What makes a man tick? What makes a man behave that way towards a woman? All of those things have to start young. Because all we can talk about all the different ways of making, women feel empowered. But women, can't feel empowered unless we're doing it together and educating people.
That's right.
And giving people opportunities to see how they can make that difference. So I start again from the beginning. It's got to be us mothers, it's got to be us women, how we bring our children into the world as a gift. We are guardians of this special gift that we give to the world. And how we treat those people, especially our boys, because we're giving them the wrong messages. You're telling him one thing on one side, if you're in the home, if you're a boy, you don't have to do the homework, the washing, you don't have to do the cooking, you don't have to do the cleaning, you don't have to do that. But if you're a girl, you have to do the washing and everything. If you have certain toys, if you have this, you have that. So it's all these things that you're bringing children up to believe, and then you say, but why do you believe that when they get older? Start from the beginning. Childhood, I want everybody to remember this today. Childhood lasts a lifetime. And when you think of your childhood and you think of what affected you as a child, you'll see the reasons why you behave in a certain way and who was influential in your life to make you think differently. That's all it takes.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I think we're going to have to close. Unfortunately, this is not even us scratching the surface together, but thank you for your insights. We have another amazing panel that's going to come in and continue the conversation, and they're going to bring different perspectives to this. But Peter, we have a session at 4 today where we can continue the conversation on the link between fragility, instability, and gender equality. And Binta, I'm sure that we are going to have many more opportunities. The UAE is a country that has supported the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. We just launched our National Action Plan.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And we also are very close with the AU. So I do hope that our paths will cross, our conversation will deepen. And Baroness, we have to keep you here.
Well, I want to thank you for being you today, getting that full understanding, and I can see you've done your homework. You're making us women feel proud of being a woman like yourself.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm very proud of this. We have a special message from the Secretary General of Religions for Peace. It's an institution that is global, that works on religious tolerance. And this is the first time that they have appointed an Arab woman, a Muslim woman, as Secretary General. And she has kindly agreed to share with us a little message. And so we'll take a look at that, and then I'll invite the next panel up. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Many, many warm greetings to each and all. I wish I could be with you. I want to compliment and say very many deep thanks to the organizers of this very important consultation opportunity to meet. I also want to say that it is very, very important for us to be talking about this particular theme of inclusivity in women's empowerment. Why? Because I think we now have reached a point in the midst of a global pandemic that is not only a public health pandemic, but also in the midst of the pandemic of carelessness for our planet and our environment, that we have to ask one another, who could we possibly have missed in our struggles to date? We stand, each and every one of us, proudly on the shoulders of many women and men who have struggled very hard for women and girls' empowerment over many, many long years. Thanks to them, we are able to be here today. Thanks to them, we are able to be in the positions that we occupy today. But we have actually perhaps missed including many different sectors. We have perhaps got habituated or used to speaking to those whom we now understand and who understand us, the like-minded. Yet this pandemic, this global pandemic of public health and environmental crises, should force us to reevaluate whom do we not include in our midst when we meet to discuss and when we partner to realize critical initiatives. Whom are we not including? Whom are we not listening to? Perhaps we are not listening to everyone. Perhaps we are not able or willing to include everyone. And yet, let me give you an example. We know, or we should know, that the rainforests, which are not exactly in our Arab part of the world, they are in other parts of the world, but they are actually the lungs of our planet. The rainforests are the lungs of our planet. In order to protect the rainforests, we are obligated to work with indigenous peoples whom most of our religious institutions do not recognize as people of faith at all. And yet, the rainforests are their land and their sacred existence. Where some of us may worship God or Allah, those indigenous people worship the land, the forests. We therefore are obligated to work with them in order to save not only the rainforests of those particular countries, but to save the lungs of the world, to save the lungs of the planet. We must work with indigenous peoples to save the lungs of this planet. So now let's bring it back home and look at who we have engaged to work on girls and women's rights and girls and women's empowerment. Are we genuinely including all people of faith? Are we genuinely including any people of faith? Are we thinking of how we can build alliances with religious institutions or faith communities whom we traditionally would only see as causing harm and would only essentialize as the causes of harm? Can we perhaps unpack our way of understanding and perceiving religious communities, religious institutions, and religious leaders, and begin to actively work alongside and to learn and also to teach some of the basics of girls and women's empowerment to those who are believers in different religious traditions, not just in our own? Perhaps at this day and age, at this moment in time, when we are confronting a very possible extinction of many human beings because of disease, and many species because of the planet's disease that we have wrought, perhaps this is a good time to pause and consider how we can include different communities of faith in the work, the stellar, remarkable work that has taken place and that is taking place to ensure, to secure girls' and women's empowerment. Let's try to be inclusive of those whom we may not have understood before, those whom we may see as only sources of harm. Let's try to see where we can find allies in communities of faith around the world. And let's be strategic about how we can include as many of them as possible, because no one religion is better than any. We all need to realize that the Creator created us all. And many of us believe in that story of creation. And those of us who believe in the story of creation may also be some very powerful proponents of women's rights. Let's try to be more diligent about the solidarity with people of faith today, so we can perhaps not necessarily save the lungs of the planet, but save the well-being of this planet. Thank you very much.
I love Azza Karam's message about inclusivity, and whether we like it or not, religious actors are here to stay. They represent the fabric of our society, and we have to find a way to work with them and promote not just tolerance, but equality for women. Okay, so I don't want to delay the conversation much further. Nadine Lebaki, a world-renowned filmmaker, may I ask you to please join me? Aya Burwela, the founder of Code on the Road and a Libya expert. And last but not least, Your Excellency Maksud Cruz, Strategic Communication Advisor at the Ministry of Presidential Affairs. I am going to jump right into the conversation. And we've had conversations, Nadine, I had a conversation with you, and Maksud, I had a conversation with you. But for the sake of being equal, I'm not going to say ladies first. I'm going to start with you, Maksud.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor and privilege to be here with you. And frankly, you cannot beat such an electrifying first panel, Baroness. It was inspiring and a beautiful, beautiful way of connecting with all of us. So I appreciate every single moment of that beautiful experience. As we celebrate in the United Arab Emirates our 50th, maybe I would like to take you back in time half a century ago. There was a young German man, blonde, green eyes, came all the way from Berlin to a small, beautiful, but promising island that is going to be the capital of tolerance of the UAE, that is Abu Dhabi. The moment he landed, he saw that beautiful brown Bedouin. It was love from the first sight. He tried to approach her, he wanted to speak to her, but everyone told him, listen, if you want to be close to her, if you want to be with her, you have to officially and formally propose, ask for her hand. That's the house, that's her father, you better speak to him. So he actually goes and he officially proposes. The old man is surprised and he thought he wants to get rid of him, so he would give him 3 impossible conditions if he wants to win the hand of his daughter. The first condition, he needs to convert into Islam. The second condition, he needs to bring a certain amount of money to show the value of his daughter. The third condition is to prepare a decent house that will be the future house of their marriage. So the young German man goes away for a few weeks. He comes back. He actually converted to Islam. He brought the amount of money. A nice house is ready. So the old man had to give his blessing for that marriage. Now, the result of that marriage is 3 ugly children. I'm number 2. And for those who know my story, I always ask the following. How would you classify someone like me? Am I white or black? Am I European or Arab? Am I Christian, Muslim, or all of the above? Well, Socrates once said in ancient times, I'm not an Athenian nor a Greek, I'm a citizen of the world. And if there is, thank you. And if there is anything that I would consider the true embodiment of what it means to be a global citizen, it has to be the Pavilion of Women at the heart of Expo, at the heart of the world in Dubai, where all of us are connected and moving forward. You see, my mother, the great woman that she is a retired lieutenant colonel from the first ever police woman in the history of this country. So when people ask me, do you think women can lead? Do you think they can be empowered? My answer always, you better talk to my mom. And to be very frank, and to address Hind's wonderful intro, and also the theme of our gathering today, for me, it's time to shift from a gender-based description of who we are to simply becoming people. I am a person first, not a gender. I'm a person first, not a color. I'm a person first, not an age. And the list goes on. From my personal experience, and I'll conclude with that, there are 2 types of identity. There's identity by birth, what people think who you should be. But then there's the identity by choice, who you choose to be. And today, we have this opportunity to make the right choice on where we need to go, because the future, at the end, is what we want it to be.
Thank you, Maksud.
Thank you.
I'm always so inspired when I listen to you, but that brings me to an important question and to something, Nadine, you and I spoke briefly about. I had wanted to ask you, how intentional are you when creating your art, when making your movies, and how do you portray women? Do you go about it strategically? And I'll let you answer, but it's very much in that same spirit that Masoud was talking about. Can you please elaborate?
First of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so really honored to be sharing this day with all of these amazing, inspiring women and men. Um, I never really do things very intentionally. What I do usually, I don't sit down and decide this is the subject I'm going to be talking about. When I started my first film, Caramel, it was a moment in my life where I was very, the question of gender expectation was very recurrent in my mind. Because I used to feel and observe women around me, especially, women in my family or neighbors, and I used to notice that they were not fully fulfilled, that there was something, there was this feeling of, I don't know, sort of sorrow or bitterness, that they were not completely happy with their lives. There is this sparkle that was missing in their eyes. So I used to wonder why, which brought me to the journey of my first film, which was Caramel. And I started, trying to ask the right questions. And through those stories of different women from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, from different religions, different social backgrounds, I understood a lot of things. I don't know if I'm right in all my analysis, but one thing I noticed is that we actually are taught shame at a very early age. We are taught, this word aib or haram or hshuma in Moroccan, that means shame. It's shameful. It's shameful. You shouldn't express yourself loudly. You shouldn't say everything you feel or want to say. You shouldn't be too exuberant. Your body is something to be ashamed of. Things like that. So I think girls, especially in the Arab world, girls grow up or become women that are somewhat they self-censor themselves. They suppress who they really are. They don't really say what they really feel. And so it became a sort of a hiding game, or hiding of their, or suppressing, or your own feelings, or who you really are. And so there's this, you end up with this huge gap between what they really were aspiring to be and what they end up being, because of this gender expectation or these gender norms.
So repression, right?
Yes. So I think, and sometimes it goes to the extent of, unfortunately in some countries, of women not being able to have access to education, not being sent to school, women being married at a very young age. In some countries, women don't even have the right to own land. Some women can't receive any loans to do any project or any. Some women even can't, give their own nationality to their children in some countries. Unfortunately, Lebanon is one of them. So this, this sort of gender expectation sort of somewhat dictates how you should be, and not really acknowledge your real potential as a human being. And I think that maybe some of the fables and stories that we hear, the princess story that we hear also as children, are part of that. Because I think, in this story, the princess has a problem at some point and she falls into a coma, and then for I don't know how many years, and then she waits for that amazing, beautiful man on a white horse that comes in and, kisses her for her to wake up from her coma. And then, picks her up by the waist and goes with her to the castle, and they have 12 children, and they live happily ever after. So there is this sort of thing that is somewhat imposed on us, and it's as imposed, I think, on men as it is on women. You know, maybe, I don't know if men want to save women. I don't know if they are expected to save us. Maybe we don't need to be saving. You know, we have to save ourselves. So it's this gender norm or gender expectation. These gender expectations are also hard for men too, because also it's sort of making it the norm that the masculinity becomes the norm for achievement, or the norm for efficiency, or productivity, or how many times, I'm sure many of the women that are present here identify with that. How many times did we trade our skirt for a suit? Because we think that masculinity is the norm. And we wear a suit because we think it's the norm, because this is how men dress to go to a meeting, because we think that this is the norm to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot, to work on, and I think that usually gender expectations are based on beliefs, based on culture, based on traditions. And all these things that are traditions and culture and are all man-made. They're all, man-thought, not human being made. That's what I was trying to say. So, so it can all change. We can change them. Tradition doesn't make people. People make tradition. So
Yeah.
this whole mindset, I think, is important that we change it.
Thank you, Nadine. I think that's very well thought and well said. And Aya, before we get to you, I'm so happy to welcome our virtual speaker, Radha Akbar, a photographer from Afghanistan who is currently in Paris. And Radha, I wanted to ask you to comment, to share your views on what Nadine was saying. When growing up in a certain culture, are you intentional with your art? Where does the issue of gender get placed?
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be speaking to you all today. It's a great honor. And I would say, to me, as a woman, as a feminist, as an activist, an artist, I always knew that being silent in the face of oppression is not something I'm capable of. And that is why I always decided to use my art as a tool to speak up against oppression and misogyny, because I was told that I am responsible to be a voice, to be a voice for change, and to use my art to tell the stories of women, to tell the stories of women, which is the stories of half of humankind, and through that to be able to improve the conditions for marginalized people and communities. But I would like to share my reflections on inclusivity and women empowerment, specifically about the situation of my women in my country, because I'm in Paris because I had to save my life, because I believe everyone in this room knows what happened to Afghanistan and to my people, and that is why I would be very happy to share my insights about the situation, the current situation in Afghanistan, because I believe this is now my responsibility to keep raising awareness about what is going on there. I would like to start by saying that, if we walk throughout the history of humankind, we learned that the most prosperous societies were the ones that women were actively included in all aspects of the society. We also learned that women have been playing major roles in changing and developing the societies. Yet, despite this fact, time and time again, societies fight against women's inclusion in the places where decisions are being made and prevent women from gaining equal status in society. And as we talk about inclusivity and women empowerment today at this event, there are millions of girls and women in Afghanistan being barred from accessing their very basic rights, the right to education, the right to work, the right, the right to raise their voices. And I feel heartbroken to say this, but today Afghanistan is the only country that women and the girls from secondary school are not allowed or banned to go to school. And the phenomenal changes and progress that was made in the past 2 decades by the women in my country just vanished overnight. And we have been sent back to 1990s, to times when women were not seen as human without a male guardian. When the United States and its allies, made a deal with the Taliban, they silenced and sidelined women. Women were completely excluded from taking part at the negotiating table. And I believe if we were included and if we were heard, the outcome of the deal could have been different. And so would the fate of 35 million Afghans who are now suffering from poverty, from violence and continued instability in Afghanistan. But my question is that, what do we learn from this? And how can we tolerate this? Because I believe for as long as there is tolerance for such indignity, for such inhumanity and indifference, we cannot expect our civilization as a human race to truly and sustainably advance. We need to remember how one woman's liberation is tied to all women, all people's liberation, and how we can't breathe freely in Paris, UAE, or DC if our sisters are chained in Kabul and elsewhere. And we must remember how fundamentalism, extremism, and misogyny are one monster with many different faces. And feeding the monster in any parts of the world strengthens it in our, other parts of the world. And we must learn to have zero tolerance against violence and racism. And by racism, I mean, we need to fight against the racist standards that because certain women are living in certain parts of the world deserve fewer rights, or if they are less valuable. We need to work collectively and with solidarity for a safer world for all, and to start, with the most marginalized people amongst us. For years, I have advocated for human rights through my, the tools that I have, through my camera, my paintbrush, my art, and my voice. But under the Taliban, I knew that this would no longer be possible. And now, again, I feel heartbroken to see that, my fellow country women are getting whipped, getting beaten, and detained by the Taliban for asking for the very basic rights, education for all Afghan citizens. And so much about my country, the future of my country is unclear, unfortunately. But one thing that I can say that is very clear is that the Taliban were and will continue to reverse human rights gains in Afghanistan through restrictions on women's inclusion, politically, socially, and culturally. And yeah, that is. I think that is all. I just wanted to share with you all.
Thank you, Radha. I think this is why we have spaces like these, because voices like yours are so important. And this is specifically why, for me, this agenda, the Women, Peace and Security agenda, is one of the most important agendas we have to work on. Because women at decision-making tables, women in peace agreements, women creating peace are necessary for building a society to go forward. Aya, I want to come to you and ask you, you're a Libya expert, and ask you perhaps to pick up on what Radha has been talking about. Tell us about, did the women in Libya face that same challenge when things became unstable?
First of all, thank you for having me, and I'd like to thank the Ministry of Tolerance for organizing this event and for inviting me. I think one of the most important things about the UAE and what it has become is that it is an example that you can do this. Nobody can say that if we empower women, we're going to move backwards, or there's going to be disaster, or any of the ridiculous things we hear certain people at pulpits say. So it's really important for people on any level to see a role model that is successful, because then you tell people it can be done. And when we know something can be done, we take that first step. So I just want to thank everyone for having me. I'm glad you asked me directly about Libya, especially after what the previous speaker said, because witnessing what happened recently in Afghanistan, which I think was traumatizing to so many Arabs, personally, it really reminded us at when something we've gone through already in the past, or we're still going through. For example, I'm from Benghazi, Libya, and after 2011, we found ourselves in the same situation the Afghans are in today. Our city was mostly abandoned. Extremists took over. And for the first time, Libyan families were losing their sons to beheading, to mutilations. In the beginning, we were left alone. Eventually, our allies joined us in our fight. And what we did was fight. We had to fight. And women took a very leading role in it. Because until then, we had, when it came to rights institutionally, we were quite advanced. And we saw that we were losing these rights. And the biggest lesson, at least I can say, from the Libyan experience is that you must be a fighter, and you cannot wait until people fight for you before you start fighting for yourself. You can't wait for permission. When it comes to security issues, they are so immediate, they're so visceral, and when you don't have security, security to me is the most fundamental basis for any right, and for education. And my background is actually in terrorism and radicalization and security building. And I find sometimes in the nonprofit world, people forget the importance of basic things. They take security for granted, at least in the West. So security, it's important to reestablish security. It's important to fight back. And when you're facing extremists, and the previous speaker very much knows that our values translate to action. Our words translate to action. What we believe translates to action. So it is really important that we promote the right values, that we don't leave an open space for opponents of tolerance and human rights to speak. And we must be fierce about it. And even when we get sad, or even when we feel alone, and I feel the Afghans feel very, very much alone, that they must unite, they must cooperate. And to build up on what the previous speaker said, women are really good in times of crisis to in cooperating together. And you know why? Because it's their sons who are in the front lines getting shot at. It's their sons who are stepping on landmines. And as you know, there's no greater love than a mother for her son or a sister for her brother. And I think this is one of the ways when we women fight, we fight not because we necessarily hate what's in front of us, we just love what's behind us or who's under our wing. So my message from the Libya experience, today we're in a much better place. I want to report that. After 10 years, I think we're going to have elections. And I was always fighting for elections. And my co-feminists would always say things like, give women a voice, give women a voice. But you have to be specific and you have to be practical. Don't say give women a voice, tell them, let us have a vote. There's no more practical way you can give anybody a voice, male or female, than giving them a vote. And finally, it seems that we're going to have elections at the end of the year. I am sure there's going to be upheavals, but we fought for it, and we're here. So the impossible is possible as long as you fight.
Well, thank you. Nadine, you know I'm looking at you.
What? What did I do?
I mean, in the best possible way, because you are somebody who has demonstrated what it means not only to be an artist, but cross the line into politics. And I think, you know, we need more women like you everywhere. So
I'm not going to personally be involved in politics anymore, because I've noticed that maybe I try to do politics through my work, through my art, and it's a different way of, approaching politics too. So, but I definitely encourage women in politics. I think we need to have a seat at the table, like you were saying, in the peace negotiations, because I do think that, like you said, it's about, there's something more visceral about protection of the ones you love and not the hatred of the ones that you perceive as enemies. I don't think it's about it. I don't think women go to weapons or arms as quickly as men do, unfortunately. I think we might be able to negotiate better things. So I definitely encourage more women to be in politics and to have a seat at the table.
Yeah. And Madame Diop, you've also talked about that a lot when you talk about how women mobilize, because they are the ones who have to work with each other to fetch the water, to send their kids to school, to build a community, to make things work. And there's so much more for us to talk about. Radha, if you're still there, thank you so much for your amazing intervention. Maqsood, I know that we could go on for hours and you might have different views from your work in countering violent extremism, where you have told me stories of women who are weaponized. So women are not always on the soft side, but I want to make sure that we have time to watch your film, Nadine. So Radha, thank you so much for joining us. To our panelists, it's really too short of a discussion, but I hope we have another opportunity. For now, I want to give you all a round of applause, and I'm going to ask everyone to stay so we can watch the short film. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've been living in isolation for the past 2 years. We're in the middle of the forest, as you can see, exploring a sustainable way of living, growing our own food, making our own bread. شفت القريشة?
This is how we make cheese.
This is how we make cheese. Which gave me the need to start searching across the world for young women who are also exploring alternative ways of living. And really turning anger and frustration into something positive. And making some kind of positive change in their surroundings, whether it's through their inventions or activism. So this film is about them, these women, who are changing the world one action at a time. one dream at a time.
Am I audible clearly? I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you. Where are you now in the world?
Somerville, South
Northeastern Nigeria.
County, Nova Scotia.
India.
The UAE.
Hello.
So now we're gonna get connected.
I'm not gonna be coming to the shoot because of the COVID situation.
So we're gonna be sending a film crew to you to film you and spend a day with you. Traveling without taking the plane. We could have gone there, you think? No.
So we're gonna be connected to you over Zoom while the film crew is filming you.
Wow! You and I are on the same wavelength. Who knew that one day the world would be locked up and that we would have to find other ways of interacting or being together?
I want to see what
Merci. Sorry, my Wi-Fi had issues, so I'm using my mobile data.
I wish I was with you.
You must be busy and overwhelmed with so many things. I know that. I'm throwing it like this, like a message in a bottle. Who knows? Maybe. Let's do that.
Let's do that. Yes, I can see the film. Okay, you can start working, Lalita.
You're okay with us recording, correct?
Yeah.
Nadine, please go ahead. Thank you.
First of all, we are very honored to be speaking with you with everything that you've been doing.
Thank you so much, ma'am. My pleasure.
So you filter the water by putting different layers of corn cobs?
Yeah.
That's it.
In my experiment, I have used different forms of corn cobs to purify the water.
So can you explain a little bit more the layers?
Definitely. So this water filtration process has 5 layers: the larger pieces, the smaller pieces, the grinded form, and finally the charcoal form. And after this charcoal form, we add fine sand.
My ultimate wish is to see each and every person getting access to clean water. No person should die due to the scarcity of clean drinking water.
Yeah, this is beautiful.
I wanted to go there. I wanted to see how people would react to such an invention. Will this filtration system really impact their lives? Will they implement it in their homes or not? You just want to be there, to be able to talk to the people, to the crew, to give everyone the energy. It's very difficult to achieve, especially when there's a delay and it keeps breaking up and the image is breaking up, the sound is breaking up. Nothing will ever replace the real thing.
I just want to start with, the beginning, which is when you had this idea.
I've always wanted to swim in the river, but mom's always said, no, it's dirty. I think it really shocked me when I saw people swimming in the river, and I wanted my mom to pull the car over to tell them 600 plus homes flush their toilets directly into this river.
You've never really swam there?
I've never been in the river.
It's just across your house?
Yeah, I can. From there, we talked about how we could actually do the testing in our kitchen, which was really cool.
And had this giant sign
in front of our home on our busy street along the river, and it said this river is contaminated with fecal bacteria. But then after that, we had other neighbors at the door and media.
And then that's when we realized we might be onto something.
Overnight, the whole page, it went viral. Everything after that was not even imaginable.
Hi, my name is Stella Bowles, and I am standing along the LaHave River in Nunavut County, Nova Scotia. I am privileged.
It became something bigger because of social media. I would have just been a kid with a poster board. With social media, it reached people way beyond the country even. I went to Sweden even to show kids there how to test water. Hopefully by 2023, we'll be able to safely swim in the water.
I sort of feel that if her parents did not really actually give any attention to her experiment, maybe this would have died. But it was really her parents that listened. I mean, listening is such an important part of I think, giving your children this power or this feeling that anything is possible.
Ella se llama Xochitl.
En su último número.
Yo cuando era chiquita en preescolar, en Ciencias Nucleares de la UNAM, me otorgó un premio a la mujer científica.
Xochitl, I want you to tell me a little bit more about your invention. How did it all start?
La mayor parte de aquí de San Cristóbal de las Casas, Chiapas, la mayor parte del año es muy fría, Así que hay personas de bajos recursos que se bañan y realizan de hacer un calentador de agua a partir de materiales reciclados y de bajo costo para calentar el agua con ayuda de los rayos del sol. Y después, aparte de que para que tuviéramos agua caliente nosotros, también para poder ayudar a las personas.
Even though the title of this short film is Women of Wonder, our next candidate is not actually a woman. He's a young, beautiful man who has been fighting alongside women and for women's rights and children's rights. It was important that I listen and understand his point of view. What made him so enraged against the injustices that were made against children and young women in his country.
I was born in 1998 in Liberia's largest slum, home to the sexually assaulted women and girls of Liberia.
You know, there's always this very special moment in everyone's life where you feel like it's a sort of an awakening. It's like this moment where you take a decision and your life shifts.
You hop on this train and this train never stops. So what was that moment?
You know, I grew up in a community where, you know, there was violence, right? Women were raped.
Every 5 minutes, a child is killed by violence. Every day, 3 children are raped in Liberia.
Back in Liberia, people actually call me the protester because they always know me to protest. Like every single thing, I would protest. One of the things that I did in 2011 was, and I was probably around 10, 11 years old then, I led a protest, you know, of thousands of young people in September 2011 to pass the children's law. There were like 10,000 children in the street. The whole capital was locked down. I remember people were like, oh, you know, this kid is always causing trouble. Yeah. We had a protest on September 11, and then September 15, it was passed. The law was passed.
Masuma is a young child activist who lives in India. And she's been very much involved in sports for protection against child marriage and child labor.
পাড়ায় সচেতনতা করেছিলাম যে বাল্যবিবাহ বন্ধ করা হোক, আর ছেলেদেরকে অল্প বয়সে যেন কাজের সাথে না যুক্ত করে দেয়। তারপর আমরা পথনাটিকা করেছিলাম যাতে মেয়েদের অল্প বয়সে বিয়ে না দেয়, তাদেরকে পড়ায়।
شو اللي بيخلي ولد عمره 11 أو 12 سنة يثور على حالة معينة عم بعيشها ويقدر يحقق من خلالها تغيير حقيقي؟
Third grade teacher gave us tiny cabbage seedlings, so I brought it home and planted it in my backyard. And then when it grew to be 40 pounds, I thought that's way too much cabbage for my family and I. This cabbage could really make a big difference. When I was donating my cabbage, I realized just how real the problem of hunger and food insecurity is. And after that moment, I thought I need to do more. So that was actually the first time that I ever drove anything. I drove a tractor when I was 12. And I have a neighbor who's an artist, and we made signs for each row. I began to hear from kids all across the country who said, we are also super passionate about ending hunger. What can we do to support you? And I thought it would be a great idea to help them start gardens in their communities and have them become Katie's Crops growers.
How many inventions do you have in your name?
Currently 12. I started inventing at the age of 10. Both my parents come from a technical background, so I grew up around engineers in the house talking about their projects. And then around the age of 10, I came up with my first invention, which was a photographer robot. I always joke about the fact that growing up, every girl I know had makeup in her bag. I'm known in my friend group to always have a screwdriver on me and my tools in my bag, just in case there's something for me to fix. I don't believe in gender roles or that toys have a gender. I think then it turned into a mission of wanting to support other young girls. When I was in 9th grade, I used to skip school a lot for events like conferences and competitions. And my English teacher joked with me and said, like, Fatma, you like invented everything in the world. You couldn't invent a robot that goes to school. So I thought it was a joke. I just thought it was funny. But then I can't imagine like children who have, for example, cancer or other diseases that stop them from actually attending school. So I created this robot using recycled materials that any child could build at home using a set of instructions.
So this is a robot that can actually move and go from one place to the other, and yeah.
So you could, like, your face is on the screen and then you control it through your device at home and move it around campus. I think it's important to have like female representation in curriculums to show these young boys and girls who are studying in school that there are female inventors and there are people who are doing things. It's just you were never taught about them.
I started to notice that in every history class, where, for example, we learn about the men that changed our history, where are the women that changed history? None of the classes that he had, there was actually a woman, a scientist, or a woman that was into math, or a woman was in work. I don't want to just to learn about wonderful women outside of the classroom, because I'm going to school to learn.
It's amazing that a girl that is Julieta's age is concerned with another girl her age somewhere else in her country not being able to breathe. I don't know if it will happen or not, if they will be able to go or not, but just the journey and just the ambition and the thought of her wanting to go there to help is in itself a huge accomplishment. And we are getting connected now to Belen, who lives in the USA. And she's going to be telling us all about her amazing initiative, which is called More Than Peach. Join with video. Hi, Belen.
Hello.
And here's some of them. We do try our best to represent every shade, or, you know, at least try to get as close to your shades.
I want to show my daughter. Come see. Belen, she created those crayons.
I just want to continue making sure kids don't feel left out, or, as I say, disincluded. My goal was to change the world one parent at a time, and that is still my goal.
So we're now at the IDP camp. It's known to be a home to thousands of internally displaced people. I was about 9 or 10 years old when one of my friends was married off. I never saw her again. I'm just wondering where she is, if she's even fine and well. But then in the course of my work, you know, I've met young ladies. Some of them live with diseases as a result of giving birth at a very young age. You know, many of them are still children, but they have to cater for children. Marriage. Are we all saying no to child marriage? Yes. But this is what happens to millions of girls, not just in Nigeria, around the world. Many of them are married off, and, you know, their destinies are being cut short, their lives are being truncated.
I became an angry child.
What is your, what's your dream?
Oprah Winfrey and I share the same birthday. I've been dreaming of meeting her. I really don't know how, but I feel like she has played a role in the way my life changed from a hopeless young girl. You know, I was like, if this person can go through, all of this and still make something great out of her life, it's possible for me too.
This is the Oprah Winfrey part, her top 10 rules of success. I found it on YouTube.
We're sending like a message in a bottle to Oprah Winfrey. I don't know if she responds to it or not. See if she would be willing to have a call with Wadi. So this is what I'm doing right now. Fingers crossed.
That region, it could have been me, it could have been anybody, right?
I hope it works. Imagine it works. 7:55. It's 7:55. In 5 minutes, we are connecting. Allow. How are you? Hey, Wadi.
Hey, Wadi. Hi. Oprah here. Oh, good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Oh my God.
Good to see you, good to see you, good to see you.
Yes, it's her in person.
So I'm honored to hear about you. Nadine told me about all of your good works. You brought this to you.
This is like the best day of my life. Oprah, I can't believe I'm talking to you.
I want to be the president.
Biden Woodard as president.
Dream for the river would definitely be to just run and jump into the water on like a nice summer day.
My dream is to really be a big part of the solution to world hunger.
None of the person should die because of lack of potable water.
Showing people a different image of Arab Muslim woman, a woman of color.
In the long run, I want to be a lawyer and then go back and defend these people.
You have to be someone that has something that the world needs, really.
You are clearly one of God's chosen women.
So we're here because we believe that women are the future and the past and the present.
We young people are change makers.
You are going to build, hopefully, a better world for all of us.
That from the slum, a child can make a difference. That from the slum, a child can speak out and his voice can be heard worldwide.
Little change is still change, right?
One thing is for sure is that we might be confined, but we're definitely not isolated. I mean, look at us. You're in India, I'm in Lebanon, and I know about your project. When something is bound to happen, because it's a great idea, it will get its way to the world. And that it's time to change perspectives and acknowledge that when women thrive, it's actually the whole humanity that thrives.
You make me proud to spell my name W-O-M-A-N.